Horizon is a game series set in a post-apocalyptic world where nature has reclaimed the Earth and giant dinosaur-like machines roam about. A mysterious corruption has turned the machines violent, and it's up to our hero Aloy to uncover secrets about her past that ultimately lead to saving the world. To aid in her mission, Aloy uses a focus, a small device she discovers as a kid that gives her information about the environment around her as well as historical information. In the game, the player uses the focus to scan enemies and learn about strengths and vulnerabilities in order to plan Aloy's attacks. The visuals of the system are striking, featuring a large holographic dome colored in neon purples and blues. The fictional UI interface also evokes an augmented reality cyberpunk feel with floating buttons and icons, which is why I was a little surprised when the developers chose not to replicate this aesthetic in the game menu screens, going instead with a more primal looking aesthetic with warm colors and rugged textures. My guess is that this was an intentional choice to stay true to the main character herself. Still, part of what makes the game so appealing is the interaction of high technology and an ancient tribal aesthetic. So I started to wonder, what might the UI look like if the in-game aesthetic was incorporated into it? There was no shortage of inspiration, and I was particularly drawn to several cutscenes. Plus, there was already a great starting point. The existing menu screen shows an animation of Aloy overlooking the horizon, so I started imagining all the ways I can make it look like she is looking at a holographic screen. And with this idea in mind, I got to work. The first goal was to remove the existing UI elements highlighted in red. To do this, I needed to bring the image into Photoshop and make use of a tool called Content Aware Fill. It works by sampling the pixels around a selected area, generating new pixels and blending them together seamlessly. I've been using this tool for years and it still feels almost like magic every time. Here's the final edited image. Now the next step is to bring the original menu screen video and the edited image into Premiere and blend them together. I use the technique of masking where a certain portion of the video is cut out, revealing only the desired part. By placing the edited image underneath, I can blend the two together. Next, I duplicate the footage and set the second half to play in reverse so that when I play the entire clip, there's a seamless loop. Then I switch over to Illustrator and After Effects to work on the focus device. I recreate the circular hologram by drawing a circle and making adjustments to the dashes and gaps until I get a look that closely resembles the original. Next, I recreate the focus using Illustrator's new 3D tool. It appears like the device is made out of carbon fiber material. And while I couldn't find a texture compatible with Illustrator, I made do with a default fabric texture by adjusting the colors and angles to create the look I want. I bring the assets into After Effects and set them in place for animation. I apply a glow effect to the circular holograms to sell the effect a little more. Then I animate the device to match the movement of Aloy's head. It's a tedious process of trial and error which requires lots of patience. There are ways to automatically track objects in After Effects, but it was a small enough task that I opted to do it manually. Let's test it. Looking good. Next, I recreate the rays emanating from the focus. I draw lines in Illustrator and bring them into After Effects where I apply a simple blur and transparency effect. Around this time I noticed that a portion of the UI I removed earlier was on part of the footage that had movement, which can't be addressed in Photoshop. Fortunately, After Effects has its own Content Aware tool that can be applied over moving objects. It's less precise and takes longer to generate, but for prototyping purposes, it's good enough. Now I'm going to demonstrate a concept that is necessary to understand the parts that follow. Here I have prepared a gradient that alternates between solid black and 0% opacity. The white parts are transparent, and I can demonstrate this by changing the background color. By using a masking technique, I can make any shape take on the properties of the gradient. The black areas reveal the color while transparent areas make it disappear. This technique can be used to do all sorts of cool things. Let's say I have a series of red lines laid out like this, and I want to make them look like lasers. I can take an image made up of varying degrees of black and transparent textures and use it as a mask. Then with some animation, you can quickly create a convincing effect. Here's the effect in the game that I'll recreate using this technique. I make this simple dome shape in Blender and export it as a 2D vector. I then apply the masking technique with some color and animation. Here's the result. Then I proceed to add these pulsating dots sprinkled around the dome. The process involves creating groups of dots and scaling them up and down to make them appear to move in 3D space. And the dome is finished. Then I create the actual holographic interface. I start by laying down the base of what will become the screen and proceed to insert some of the original icons in the game. These icons were loosely traced in Illustrator and are far from accurate to the original designs. But since this is a prototype, perfect accuracy isn't necessary. I bring the icons into After Effects and start placing the typographic elements of the menu screen. Next, I start making the quest menu items. At this point, it is important to talk about the accessibility principles of UX design. Fictional UI, such as the cyberpunk aesthetic, is fictional for a reason in that while it looks cool, it is far from user-friendly. One of the biggest culprits is color contrast. Brightly colored, densely packed monochrome windows with white text are difficult to read for many people. So in a studio setting, this design concept would undergo extensive user testing before it is finalized and shipped with the game. After refining the menu animations, I begin working on the 3D effect of the screen. I add some hovering UI buttons and align them with the screen. I then animate the rotation and test it. Looking great, but a tad too pronounced. So I dial the rotation down a little and I'm good to go. Once I'm happy with the overall look of the menu screen, I begin animating how the player might interact with the menu. This includes navigating between quests, selecting a mission, and reading details. Every part of the screen is considered, from how the text fades in and out, the direction of the movement, and the pacing. The player would return to the screen often, and too many time-consuming effects can disrupt the gaming experience. With the final touches in place, here's the final design. I set out to test an idea for a more immersive user experience by incorporating elements of the in-game mechanics into the menu screen. The result was a game menu that feels like it is Aloy herself interacting with the focus, keeping track of her missions, and updating her progress. I love this concept of immersive UI design, and it is an aesthetic that I'd like to see a lot more of in future games. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later.